Me again, Dr. Mashburn, and today we're going to talk about the bone labs. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of kind of what to expect on bone labs and a little bit of information about the cartilages of the cartilages of the skeleton, sorry about that. So let's kind of get started and kind of let you know what you need to expect, what to look for over the next coming weeks for the bones, and also talk to you about the cartilages. Alright, so let's see if we can get this going. Acting goofy today. Alright, so let's start with the cartilages first, and then we'll start talking about the bones, because this won't take just a second to talk about cartilages. Hopefully you remember from Unit 2 on the tissues that you have something called connective tissue, the stuff that glues us together, that binds us together, and examples of connective tissue are blood, adipose tissue, but also bone, osseous tissue, and the cartilages. We talked about hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage in Unit 2. And so when you think of cartilage, you just always think of bone. Cartilages are always associated with the skeletal system. And I like you to know where you can find certain types of cartilages. There's three types: the hyaline, well, it's not working, the pen's not working, hang on. The hyaline cartilages, the elastic cartilages, and the fibrocartilages. And you need to know where you can find each of the three types of cartilages. Now, I tell my students in lab, don't remember where hyaline cartilage is, remember where it ain't. Okay, I know that sounds funny, but let me tell you how you can remember. If you'll know where the elastic cartilages are and where the fibrocartilages are, everywhere else is hyaline. So again, don't remember where hyaline is, just remember where it ain't, because then by default, that means it's hyaline cartilage. So let me show you where the elastic cartilages are. The elastic cartilages are in your ear. So this part here, the kind that can bend and kind of bounce back to its original shape, is elastic. So in the ear, and there's not a picture of it, but in the epiglottis. So that little flap that covers your trachea when you eat food, so that food and drink don't go down your windpipe, don't go down your trachea, that little flap that covers your trachea, that's in kind of behind the larynx, that's your epiglottis, and it's made out of elastic cartilage. It just kind of bends and closes when you're swallowing food or drink. So your ear and your epiglottis are elastic cartilage. Your fibrocartilages are these red things, and there's one here called the meniscus. It's inside between the knee, between the femur and the tibia. You have one here called the pubic symphysis, between your two big hip bones. And then you have all these that are between each of the vertebrae, which we call those your discs between your vertebrae. So if you have a ruptured disc, that's what we're talking about. Now the fibrocartilages are really strong, so you expect to find them in places that you would expect shock, so there's shock absorbers. So think about your knee pounding on your tibia as you run. You need something that's really strong to keep that pounding, to take in the shock. You also have them in your vertebra to keep those vertebrae from pounding against each other. And then it's also a really strong piece of cartilage. And those are two big hip bones. Those hip bones, they need to be held together by something strong, and that's the pubic symphysis. Elastic cartilages can move a little bit, and in particular in females, when you're getting close to delivery, some of the hormones that come around when you're starting to get ready to deliver will actually soften up this fibrocartilage and allow it to stretch just a little bit. So that opens up the birth canal, opens up the pelvic cavity just a little bit to allow the baby's head to exit during a vaginal birth. Now, unfortunately, it does go back, but it doesn't always go back to the same size. It doesn't always come as close together as it was. So sometimes you will wind up with a little bit of a wider hip after birth than you had before. It's just the way it is. So now we know where elastic cartilages are. We know where fibrocartilages are. Everything else, all the blue stuff, are your hyaline cartilages. They're going to be at the ends of all your long bones. They're going to be anywhere in a space between a bone. The cartilage that connects your ribs to your sternum, these are called your costal cartilages, your rib cartilages. The cartilage that makes up your nose. The cartilage that's inside your trachea. So if you look at the trachea, that's hyaline cartilage. So anywhere else that you can think of that has cartilage is hyaline cartilage. So that's the easiest way to remember it. Don't remember where it is, just remember where it ain't. Oops, sorry, my phone. Okay, so let's talk about the bones now. And so what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is we're going to divide the bones into different groups and kind of take it one group at a time. And we divide it basically into two major groups. The first one is the axial skeleton. And what you see, all this blue, this is the axial skeleton. And the axial skeleton is composed of the skull, the thoracic cage, which is your ribs and your sternum, and the vertebral column, which are all your vertebrae, or your backbone. Alright, so we're going to learn all the bones that make up the skull. We're going to learn all the bones that make up the sternum. We're going to learn all the ribs, and we're going to learn all the vertebrae that make up your vertebral column or your backbone. And we're going to do this, over the next couple of weeks and learn all your axial skeletal bones. Everything else we call the appendicular skeleton. Remember, these are your appendages. They're the things that kind of hang off your trunk, off your main axial skeleton. Your appendicular skeleton includes two girdles, your pectoral girdle and your pelvic girdle. Now, what is a girdle? It's something that holds you in, right? So your pectoral girdle is basically what holds your arms on. It's basically your shoulders. And your pelvic girdle is what holds your legs on. It's basically your hips. Okay, so your appendicular skeleton is made up of your pectoral girdle or your shoulders, your pelvic girdle or your hips, the arms that hang off of those, and the legs that hang off of the hips. And that's your appendicular skeleton. And so over the next couple of weeks, we're going to learn to name each bone, and you're also going to learn a few features about each bone, something special, something little knot or dot or twist or turn, something about the bone that's going to be a little special about it. I'll show you those in my lectures, and you'll learn the special features about these bones. Now, something else I want you to pay attention as we go along, and sometimes I'll say it and sometimes I'll forget, so as you're going along, we talk about bones, make sure you look in your book and try to classify, because when we classify bones, we classify them on their shape. And the types of bones we have are long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Long bones means that they are longer than they are wide. So this is the humerus. This is a long bone. Long bone doesn't actually mean that it's really long. It just means it's longer than it is wide. So even these bones in your fingers, these are technically long bones because they're longer than they are wide. The bones in your feet and your toes are long bones. These are long bones in your legs. Okay, and we're going to name all these different bones, long bones of your arm. You have flat bones. Example of the flat bones are your sternum, but also the bones that make up your cranial cavity. A lot of those are flat bones. You have short bones. These are basically the bones that make up your ankle and your wrist, your carpals and your tarsals. And then you have irregular shaped bones, and these are bones that don't really fit in any kind of any classification. They're just kind of odd-looking bones. An example of an irregular bone are your vertebrae. And so as we go along, I'll try to remember to say this is a flat bone, this is a long bone. But as you're going along, look in your book and make sure that you can classify bones based on their shape. Okay, a few things I want to cover, kind of give you a heads up as you're studying. Number one, I've put a lab guide in. You've got this lab guide. This is basically what you need to know for the bones. It's got the bones that you're required to know, and it's in Blackboard for you. It has a list of bones, and then beside each bone there is a list of features. Now, a lot of these bones have a ton of features. Just learn the features in your lab guide. Don't go learn extra. Okay, so if it's not in your lab guide, you don't have to know it. So find your bone, find your feature, and that's what you're going to go by as you study. I also included a few worksheets, so as you're going through, you'll find some little worksheets in there, some labeling exercises to help you find these bones and some of these features. There's all kind of things as part of your lab guide. So make sure you take that and print it off as you're going through your bone lab. Another thing I wanted to point out to you, it's a free, let me get out of PowerPoint. Hang on. A free website. If you'll go to you need to use Chrome or Firefox. Don't use Internet Explorer, first of all. But when you get into Chrome or Firefox, go to biodigitalhuman.com, and it is a free web app for anatomy. And it's really good for all the systems, but I really like it for the skeletal system. You can take the body and turn it around, flip it upside down, flip it forward. You can click on the bones, find each bone, click on it, identify it. You can look at just the cranium, you can just look at the frontal bone, just whatever you want to do. You can expand it, make it smaller, make it bigger. It's just a great, easy way to start learning your bones. When we get to muscles, you can use it for that as well. It's also great for tissues, but it is great for the bones and the muscles. Now, another website I want to make sure that you realize that you have is good Mastering. It's going to cover that one more time. When you go to Mastering, don't forget you have my study area. Click on my study area. Go down to, you can always do your chapter quizzes. There's a great place to study your chapters. But don't forget you have PAL, which is your Practice Anatomy Lab. You can go to the skeletal system, the skull, and you're going to actually see actual skulls, and you just roll over it, and it helps you identify different bones. Okay? So, again, you've got plenty of ways to learn the bones. I'm going to talk to you in videos. You're going to see some YouTube videos, and you've got plenty of ways to practice. So just take advantage of all the stuff that you've got that you paid for or that's free online. All right, that's all I've got to say today. I'm going to move on to another lab video, and I will see you soon.